When we're talking about dipping and otherwise multi-classing, it is definitely true that specific builds and specific niches will allow for or require you to blend together multiple classes in order to come out somewhat the greater than their whole. But what we're talking about mostly today are the classes that are just oversized in power for a single level or two or three that are going to boost the potency of a class because of how front-loaded your ability set is in that subclass. And I would say that in 2024, classes are more dippable than they ever have been rather than less. There's a number of new additions to the good dipping classes that I think will surprise you. My name is Timothy, though some people do call me Tim, and I'm a professional DM running over 300 games of Dungeons & Dragons every year, and today I'm going to try and answer those questions by highlighting my 5 top best picks for dip classes in 2024, as well as going over some of the basics of how you can have your cake and eat it too. And that is one of the reasons why all 5 of the classes that I've selected as the top dips for 2024 are 1-level dip options. When you take a single level dip, the only thing you're giving up is your capstone, which in some cases can be a lot, and in other cases, I'm looking at you, Ranger, they're not exactly a big deal to have gone missed out. Meanwhile, giving up your epic boons can be a pretty painful choice because some of them are incredibly potent. If you're a full spellcaster, you might have less reason to hang on to your epic boons than others, but for pretty much everybody else, they're almost vital. They're just so much more powerful than taking a second level in another class. But there is another way to have your cake and eat it too. Technically, if you are taking a multi-class character and you end up with a spread of 16 levels one way and 4 levels the other, when you mix them together, if you time it right, you could have your 19th and 20th levels both give you feats, which could mean that you could get 2 epic boons while also getting access to a subclass in both your different classes. This might actually be one of the most potent opportunities and options for the full-scaled 1st to 20th level, though it does mean giving up on your 17th level ability of whatever class you're delving into, which for some classes is fairly mediocre, but for others is quite potent. But by the time we get into that, we're pretty much delving down into the specific builds category, which is not where I'm going with this for you today. Because the thing that makes a 1-level dip potent is the amount of things that are stacked into that first level. It's the reason why Hexblade was such a popular warlock option for multi-classing characters, particularly for paladins and sorcerers, because not only did you gain armor proficiencies, which could be sorely lacking if you were, for instance, a sorcerer, but in addition to that, you also got the ability to change your charisma modifier from being just your spellcasting stat to also being your physical stat to make that charisma gish. They've made a lot of changes to warlock, which means this is no longer necessary. Changing primary stats, adding armor proficiencies, or otherwise giving access to special or restricted abilities without a lot of loss is the key to a good dip class. But without further ado, let's begin the countdown. We have a little bit of a tie in number 5 with Druid or Cleric. Thanks to the new Divine and Primal Order abilities that are granted at first level, Clerics and Druids now gain the option to automatically choose at first level whether or not they have the higher armor proficiency that they were otherwise lacking. This means that anybody who dips into the class can go ahead and pick up armor proficiency, heavy, and shields. In addition to the benefits they're getting from the base multi-class, this means that as a Cleric you can pick up heavy armor proficiency and shields with a single level dip without losing any spellcasting prowess for just a single level. On Wizards, this is probably one of the most potent options to bring your armor class skyrocketing up into the highest tiers, as long, of course, as you have enough strength to back it. Meanwhile, the Druid is limited to medium armor, but if you already had a little bit of dexterity and you were planning on that, then it means you get access to the Druid spell list instead of the Cleric spell list, which can be cool, especially if you're trying to get access to Druid cantrips. Or you just want the ability to dump all your spell slots at the end of the day into Goodberry. And of course, both classes have access to spells like Cure Wounds and other good options for upcasting with the full list of spells that you're going to have by dipping into this from a full spellcaster. If, however, you're a full spellcaster that's planning on being up close and personal, then at number 4, we have the Paladin as a 1-level dip, granting you medium armor and shields naturally for the multi-classing rules, and weapon mastery without breaking from a full spellcaster. In terms of spell slot progression, a single level dip in Paladin costs you very, very little, while giving you access to Divine Smite as a once-around bonus action spell option to dish out extra damage up close and personal. This might be actually a really solid choice for, say, a war cleric to take that single level dip, so to improve their martial prowess just by getting access to Divine Smite, and it doesn't cost them anything except their Divine Intervention, which, though awesome, is not as cool as it's made out to be in my personal opinion. Similarly though, if you want to build the old sorcerer, warlock, paladin, mishmash, close range gish monstrosity, that option still exists. And a single level of paladin is all you need to lead into that. Number 3 on the top dip choices is Ranger, granting you Hunter's Mark access as well as 2 free casts that don't count against the 1 spell slot per round rule, medium armor and shields from your weapon proficiency, and access to the all-important weapon masteries. Without breaking from a full caster spell slot progression, a single level dip into Ranger can go a long way on a lot of different builds. This could be the way that you get access to weapon mastery for a war cleric or a monk, or it could be a way that you get access to Hunter's Mark for a melee fighter type. Surprisingly, there is very little downside to taking a single level of Ranger on almost any class, as long, of course, as you're willing to give up your capstone. Coming in at number 2, there's probably no surprise that Warlock is still on the list. In fact, the only surprise might be that Warlock is the number 2 and not the number 1 dip class. The big reason that Warlock stayed on the list despite the loss of Hexblade as a subclass at first level is because of the Pact of the Blade. If you're looking for a Warlock that's dishing out all the Eldritch Blast nonsense, then you're now going to have to go to level 2 in order to get access to Repelling Blast or Agonizing Blast, which are still just as broken and awesome as they used to be. But Pact of the Blade saw some significant improvements, and instead of being a first level option, it's now a first level invocation, which basically is the same thing, but means a lot more. Now you can create or bond to any weapon that you want with just a bonus action, and are automatically proficient in that even if you otherwise lack the proficiency. In addition, you are given the option to utilize your charisma modifier, making it the instant dippable number 1 choice for anybody who's planning on making a charisma gish character. But if that wasn't enough for you, we also completely changed it out so that if you wanted to, instead of dealing whatever type of damage the weapon is supposed to deal, you can substitute it out to deal necrotic, psychic, or radiant damage with no restrictions on how you change. If you were able to make 4 attacks in a round, why not try slashing, psychic, radiant, and necrotic all in one turn? Test all of the resistances in one go and find out which one does the best damage. Suffice to say, this is the sole reason that the Warlock stayed on top of almost all other classes when it came to a single level dip, because it turns paladins into a single attribute dependent class instead of a multiple one, and still makes sorcerers turn from being the spellcasting awesome into melee fury. Despite the loss of Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade and the improvement to True Strike that allows you to also utilize different statistics, this is still a great choice all the way around, and having an extra spell slot that recovers every short rest doesn't hurt either. But here's the number 1 dip class in 2024 that I think might be a big surprise, or perhaps a source of some contention, and that's Monk. On paper, under multi-class, a monk only gains hit points and the first level abilities, no proficiencies, which makes them seem like they're not exactly likely to fit into this category. However, the martial arts and unarmored defense options of the monk are so stacked that they really add up fast. Obviously, being able to use your dexterity and your wisdom together to determine your armor class instead of worrying about armor means that there are some options available for druids or clerics or rangers that aren't able to sport heavy enough armor to otherwise suit themselves, or that are investing heavily into both dexterity and wisdom in the ranger's choice. But it's the martial arts ability that really kicks things up a notch. Because not only can you use your dexterity to make an unarmed strike to kick somebody, punch somebody, or the like to deal damage as a bonus action, you now don't have to have taken the attack action in order to do so. Meaning that any class that takes a single level dip in this gets a d6 base attack roll using their dexterity as a bonus action available every single round. That's a full caster cleric, for instance, that's up in your face, casting away, and kicks you in the nads while you're at it. They're also able to use their dexterity instead of their strength in order to determine their grappling DCs and shoving DCs, which means that you can improve on those significantly if you're not a strength-based character. It does come with the caveat that you can't be wearing armor or using a shield with any of these abilities, so you want to make sure that you're going to double down on this option. Druids and rangers are going to have the easiest time. Disagree with my list? Awesome. Then I'd love to hear about it down in the comments below, but otherwise, here you are at the end of the video, which means that you're my favorite. And since you're my favorite and you made it all the way to the end, you also get cat videos, so that'll be following right up. Thanks for watching and happy adventuring.